Hi, I'm Nir, and if you ever click my channel, you've seen this. That's the first game I've ever made. That game sucks, so let's talk about a real game. And no, I'm not talking about Hollow Knight Silksong because that game hasn't released yet. So what game am I talking about? Dungeons of Evergrune. Hey, that guy looks familiar. And if you're thinking, what the hell is that? I've never heard of that before. That's because you haven't. So allow me to explain. Dungeons of Evergrune is the best game I've ever done, and it's not even close. Yes, as shocking as it may sound, I made this game. It works, I don't know how, but I'm happy with it. And how is this game any better than my other games? Well, let me show you. It has really cool stuff such as multiple playable characters, actual 3D models, enemies that follow you, different attacks for each character, a level up system, a shop to buy resources, a database that saves your account. That was hell to make, by the way, and no bugs, for the most part. And now you're asking, wow, the game looks great, how come you've never talked about it? Well, for starters, I didn't want to make other indie devs jealous because of this incredible game. I'm joking. There are two reasons why I never talked about it. The first is that it was the final project for high school, so they kind of technically own this project. I actually don't know how that works. The second part is the database. Oh my god, the database. I'll explain that later. But for now, let's talk about what really matters, which is the game. So if you enjoyed the video, subscribe, so I can make more videos like this. Yay. So the first thing I'll be talking about is the characters, because they're basically the whole game. There are 3 playable characters in the game, Sean, Ashley, and Tess. They all have their own unique mechanics and abilities, like Sean shoots bullets from his fingers, Ashley shoots some digital thing I never really thought about what it is, and Tess throws a wrench. Yeah, that probably hurts. Each character has 3 abilities, their main attack, their secondary attack, and their ultimate. The ones I just listed are the main attacks of the characters. Main attacks have a small cooldown of less than a second, and they're just the basic attacks to deal damage. Secondary attacks are just like the main attacks, but they take a few seconds to recharge. They could have a side ability like Ashley's, which heals her when it hits an enemy. Ultimates are the big ability of each character. Unlike the main and secondary attacks, these are not always for dealing damage. They are charged when projectiles from other attacks hit enemies, and when they reach 100% they can be used. And those are the basic abilities. I'm not gonna explain each character's ability in detail because that's boring. For now, I'll talk about the dungeon. The dungeon is the only level in the game. Yes, there's only one dungeon, don't blame me, I was on a tight schedule. And this is where the name of the game comes from, Dungeons of Evergrune, because you play in a dungeon, which is in Evergrune. You're probably familiar with the concept of dungeon crawler. Basically there's a lot of rooms with enemies and rewards. Well, this dungeon is no different. Throughout the dungeon there are chests that when opened can give resources. I'll explain what those are in a bit. Some chests are traps, which means that when you try to open them, enemies will spawn. Defeating all the enemies will make you be able to open the chest. The enemies aren't particularly strong or complex, they just follow you with no regard for their safety and attack once they get close. You also get a key when defeating all these enemies. Is it the key to happiness and success? No, that's ridiculous. Keys are just used to open doors in the dungeon that contain more chests or more enemies, or to open the door of the final boss. Please ignore the fact that these doors don't have locks and thus keys would be useless here. This is a game, it doesn't need to make sense, okay? Now speaking about the boss. Once you get enough keys, you can open the final room where you will face off against a very strong enemy. Just like the other enemies, it's not that complex, it also mindlessly follows the player around and attacks once he gets close. Of course, the boss has way more health than a normal enemy, and deals more damage too. It only has one attack, which is swiping a sword, but hey, it's a really cool swipe. Realistically speaking, the only dangerous thing about the boss fight is the enemies that it spawns and the crossbows. And what happens when you defeat the boss? You get to leave the dungeon and clear the level with all the resources that you collected. Congratulations! And that's the main gameplay of the game, but there's other stuff behind this. When completing the dungeon you receive all resources you collected and gain reputation, but what even is that? What's that for? Well, that's the real fun of the game for me. First, talking about reputation. You gain reputation when clearing the dungeon, and it's based on the time you take to clear it and your score. I don't remember the exact formula I used, but you'll get about 200 reputation points on average. Every 100 reputation points that you gain, you will receive 1 resource pack for free. A resource pack is a random reward that will give you one of 3 resources in the game: upgrade orbs, gold, or crystals. Resource packs have 4 different rarities: common, rare, epic, and legendary. This is definitely unique and no other game uses these rarities. Of course, the higher the rarity, the more rewards you get, and the lower are the chances of getting it. Speaking of chances, upgrade orbs are the most common resource, and crystals are the rarest. Upgrade orbs are used to upgrade the character level. Each character can be upgraded up to level 10, and each level increases their total health and the damage of each attack. Not only that, every few levels you unlock the purchase option for enhancements, which are improvements to the character's abilities. It works like this: when the character reaches level 5, you can buy the first enhancement, which improves the main attack of the character. At level 8, you get to buy another enhancement, which improves the character's secondary attack. And at the max level, level 10, you can buy the final enhancement, which improves the ultimate. All of them cost 1000 gold. So that's what upgrade orbs and gold are for, but what's the use of crystals? Well, buying upgrade orbs and gold in the shop. But before you say, oh that's stupid, I'll also say that you can buy a random rarity bag for 30 crystals in the shop. Technically you can get less than if you just bought directly, but okay, yeah, it's just gambling. But you know, Genshin does well and Balatro was nominated for Game of the Year, so I think players love gambling. Crystals have one other use, which is to unlock new characters, each of them costing 100. There's no other way to unlock them, you just gotta pay up. Look, I'm sorry, okay? I had a time limit, I couldn't afford to waste time making another way to unlock the characters. But yeah, I think that's pretty much all there is to it. I really wish I had time to implement new characters with more unique abilities and new enemies and maybe one more dungeon. So I have plans for this game. As I mentioned before, the database was a huge pain and the reason I can't even publish the game. Okay, this part's gonna be boring because I'll just explain the database system, so you can just skip this part if you want. To make the database, I use this thing. It's called Champ Server. Champ? Zamp? I don't know how to pronounce it. The way it works is simple. It creates a connection between the remote database and the game. But when Champ is turned off, I cannot access the database and so the game doesn't work. You might see the problem here. You need Champ Server for the game to work, and that's a third-party app. And I don't want people to download a third-party app just to play my game. I could try using something else for the database, but that will require rewriting a lot of physics and code, so what I'm gonna do is restart. Don't get me wrong, I love the game, but I also feel like it failed in some aspects. It's different from what I envisioned, and the code is an absolute mess. I already restarted with a small prototype and used Unity's built-in character controller and cinema machine, which is much simpler than hard-coding everything. You may noticing I'm using primitive objects because I also want to revamp the look of the game, because I think the models are bad. But I like what I have so far, which is much more than what I'm currently showing because I take way too long to edit the videos. I'm sorry. So that's my plan. I don't want this game to just die because I love multiple playable characters and it's something fun to do and code. I could start a devlog series on this game, that depends on your feedback. You know, like the video, subscribe, all that stuff. Anyways, I'll end the video here, and just a reminder, I do have actual games that you can play on itch.io. They're not as good as the one I've showed, but hey, there's something. And I hope this game turns out even better than those. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. See ya.